responsibilities. He calls for additional synergies between the Commission and the Court. And he says that the Commission, the AU Commission, I should repeat the previous recommendation because I called it that commission. He says there should be greater synergies between the ACHPR and the African Court. And then he says that the ACHPR and the AU Commission should work together to find solutions to the current challenges facing the two and plan for the future. His final recommendation is that member states should be urged to cooperate with the ACHPR and discharge their obligations under the Charter to address the current constraints faced by the ACHPR. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chairperson, and my brother, Commissioner Pacific. Can I, since the Chairperson for this morning has so quite clearly and elaborately established the protocols, can I simply abide by the podium protocols is established and adopt those as mine as well? And can I also begin with 3 preliminary observations? I have 5 substantive points to make, and I will conclude with a set of quite brief recommendations. First of all, let me begin by acknowledging our chairwoman of the Commission, Madam Dupe Atoki, on her very special day. Today is her birthday. And, thank you very much for that, and may you be blessed with good health and a good life. Can I also secondly pay tribute to some 5 people whom I've met in the course of the past 25 years who can't be here with us. Some of you may remember Chief Justice Moleleki Mokaba of Botswana, who continued to attend sessions of the Commission even after he had been diagnosed with a terminal ailment. Special Representative of the Secretary General, Alim Bey, a former foreign minister of one of our fraternal countries on the continent whom we lost to an air crash, tragically. A man actually who was the first Secretary of the Commission, whom I think it's important to acknowledge in an acting capacity, Sam Grace Ibinjira of Uganda. And of course, 2 colleagues from the civil society sector, Fiona Hunter, who was the head of the Secretariat of Penal Reform International, who tragically died quite young, lost to cancer as well. And we did work with her quite seriously in establishing the special mechanism on prisons and places of detention in Africa in the mid-1990s, for those who track that far back. And of course, Alpha Fa, whom we lost again to cancer very recently, and who played a significant role in establishing both the work of the Secretariat of the Commission and subsequently the Institute for Human Rights and Development in the Gambia. Let me, as the last of my preliminary points, express personal gratitude for the opportunity to be here, both to the Commission and to the government and people of Côte d'Ivoire. As some of you may know, I've been unable to personally participate in any of the sessions of the Commission for the past 3 years. I am personally persona non grata in the Gambia, and if this session had taken place in the Gambia, I would not have been able to make it. I was PNG'd from the Gambia 3 years ago, and this goes to the point that was made yesterday about the need to guarantee the safety, security, and integrity of advocates for human rights in seeking to participate in the important work that this Honorable Commission does. And for that, I'm quite grateful that I'm able to participate in this session. Let me now proceed to my substantive points. And I'd start with my conclusion first. And that is the fact that we're here discussing relationships between the Commission and other organs of the AU says how far we have come. This conversation would not have been possible 20 years ago. Because at that point, human rights was the sole enterprise of the African Commission in the African family. As a result, the crafters, the original drafters of the Charter, gave the Commission a set of responsibilities that were too much for any single institution comprising 11 human beings, no matter how formidable all of them collectively could have been. The Commission was given a mix of promotional and protective functions, responsibilities over casework providing remedies to victims, responsibilities for interstate dispute resolution, conciliation, good offices, responsibilities for addressing mass atrocities, serious and massive violations of human rights extending to issues of humanitarian law in Africa, protection of refugees, and of course, advancing the reform of its own institutional mechanisms. It was a challenge that no single institution could by itself fulfill. But it is progress that we're here today, because since the creation of the Commission, with the landscape for the protection of human rights on the continent has been peopled normatively as well as institutionally by lots of other entities, making it possible, therefore, to, one, on this occasion, celebrate what are, in fact, actual items of progress. We cannot take it for granted that today we can talk about and criticize jurisprudence from the Commission and from the African Court. Because for those whose memory track that back, when the Commission was established, there was in fact a doubt as to whether or not the Commission could do cases. Today we take it for granted that there is an African Court. That is an achievement attributable to the work and advocacy of the Commission. Number two, today we take it for granted we're discussing recommendations by the Commission. Well, then people did not know whether or not the Commission could make recommendations. We did not know whether or not there could be special procedures. And in fact, people disputed whether or not the Commission could receive and consider state reports. The fact that today all of that is taken for granted means we have had progress. Number three, the Constitutive Act of the African Union today constitutionalizes the African Charter on Human and People's Rights as part of the constitutive objectives of the continental institution. In 1981 and in fact in 1987, that was unthinkable. And as Judge Kyoko, who is the immediate past legal counsel of the African Union, has pointed out, the protection of human rights was not part of interstate enterprise at that point. And the fact that since 1991, from the African Economic Community Treaty up until the most recent treaties, protocols relating to the Peace and Security Council of the African Union, you now have human rights as a constitutive objective of interstate relations in Africa, is part of the achievements that we must credit the Commission with. And in saying this, I go back to what the founding parents of the African Charter say. And in 1979 in Monrovia, in one of the three draft proposals that went for before the negotiations, Professor Siteze, who died last year, and who was one of the principal draft persons of the African Charter, said, and I'd like to recall this on this occasion, that it will be hard to get African states to accept in the immediate term the creation of a supranational institution for the protection of human rights. Efforts should be made, therefore, to focus on the creation of a regional institution responsible for formulating recommendations and, subject to the agreement of the states concerned, collecting surveys. If carried out discreetly, the latter task could be a factor of accrued prestige and would perhaps make states more inclined to broaden the powers of the regional body in future. That is where we have come to. That this very modest proposal in 1979 has matured. And today we are discussing not architecture, not the ways and means by which to design the relationship between this commission and a set of essentially reluctant and in some cases actually quite malevolent rulers who were unwilling to allow it to exist, but actually building partnerships between the commission and lots of other regional institutions at the highest levels of political and diplomatic decision making in Africa. That is progress. And I think it is important that when we meet like this, and many of us Africans like to take our continent for granted and not acknowledge that there has been progress. When we meet on these occasions, we should acknowledge that progress in these matters is not linear. There will be progress, there will sometimes be retrogression, there will be contest, there will be regression. But when you look at the gradient of our continent, since the establishment of this commission, it points in a positive direction. There are still struggles, and those struggles are good because we now have a normative basis that legitimizes them, and we've got institutions that are obligated to ensure that those struggles continue and prosper. Now, having said that, it is also the case that while the first 25 years of the Commission, therefore, has been defined by the challenge of establishing this architecture, the next 25 years is one of variable geometry, in which the relationships between the Commission and African states, these other peer institutions, and all of us will have to be defined. And the Commission itself has to define its functional specialization in what has become a forest of regional human rights institutions. From when it began as a lonesome institution, we now have a forest of institutions. And the Commission must continue in the next 25 years to justify its existence, and more than that, to claim its rightful leadership role. Because while all the other institutions in Africa have very specialized roles, the Commission is everything. And even if it cannot do all those things very well all the time, it's got to continue to provide leadership in some of those in which it cannot be replaced. And in this presentation, I deal with three of those. One is the business of providing remedies and effective protection for violations of human rights. The second is addressing mass atrocities, which has become a major defining challenge for human rights in Africa and is at the heart of the contest, not just with political leadership in Africa, but in fact with international institutions such as the International Criminal Court. The third is the challenge of progressive development of human rights norms in Africa. Take, for instance, the challenge of protection. In 1998, the continent created the African Court on Human and People's Rights. And there is a massive zone of overlap between the court and the commission. And in the paper, we've tried to address and outline how these zones of overlap are coming to be. This is not the place to elaborate on all of that. I'll just take one instance. The Charter allows for the protocol and the Charter allow for the African Court to remit cases to the African Commission in situations where the court decides that it cannot receive a case. And the court has gone on in about 4 cases to decide that even when it does not have jurisdiction, it can send a case down to the African Commission. The question is, what does a court that does not have jurisdiction, what business does it have giving directives in respect of a case in which it has already said it does not have jurisdiction? Is the Commission obliged to receive a case transmitted to it by an entity that says it doesn't have jurisdiction to look at the case? But if the Commission says we will not receive it, you will have a riot, because the Commission will be second-guessing the court in a way that could end up giving people the impression that there is a failure of feeling of good comradeship between the Commission and the court. So how do you manage this? The commission can nevertheless receive the case and say, well, we cannot address this case because the person that sent it to us